Do you have any evidence to prove otherwise?
Prove otherwise that Jesus is a Muslim?
Yeah, wasn't a Muslim.
What's your evidence that he was?
Well, I believe the Quran is the word of God.
So I don't. That doesn't make him a Muslim. How do you? What does the Quran give you as an evidence that Jesus was a Muslim, that it got this claim right?
Okay. Could I use the fact that the Bible is unreliable as a source of evidence? Or
You can say that, and then I'll show you how you don't believe that.
This exchange sets the tone for a crucial discussion. What actually counts as evidence when making claims about Jesus? The Muslim participant begins with a conclusion. Jesus is a Muslim, but struggles to provide independent support beyond appealing to the Quran. When pressed, the argument shifts to attacking the reliability of the Bible rather than positively proving the claim. That move ends up backfiring because dismissing one source doesn't automatically validate another. As the conversation unfolds, the lack of a consistent definition of Muslim leads to confusion, even opening the door to unintended conclusions that expose the weakness of the argument. At the end of this debate, the Muslim unfortunately rather proved that Satan is a Muslim because he submits to God. This kind of dialogue highlights why clear definitions, consistent reasoning, and evidence, not assumptions, are essential in theological debates. If you want more breakdowns like this, be sure to subscribe to Creed Collision, like the video, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement helps push these important conversations further.
Okay. So you said that the Bible is unreliable. And I said you can use that. And I would show you otherwise that you don't believe that. I'll show you that you believe the Bible is reliable. Would you like to just see that?
yeah, I would.
What language did Jesus speak?
Islam doesn't provide evidence.
I know Islam
regarding
doesn't
that.
provide it, but what language did he
I
speak?
would assume Aramaic through historical accounts. I'm not sure though.
Through historical accounts, what language?
Aramaic,
What historical accounts tell you that he spoke Aramaic?
secular ones that teach us in school.
What secular account? Where do they get this from? Because they're not primary sources.
There is one source that isn't from any Christian.
Yeah, what is that?
What was it? I forgot the name of that source, but
There is
was
no
one
source.
source.
There is nothing, unless they're pulling from a Christian source.
This moment exposes a key tension in the argument. The Muslim debater claims the Bible is unreliable, yet when asked a basic historical question, what language Jesus spoke, he immediately leans on historical accounts, which ultimately trace back to the same early sources that preserved Jesus' life. The Quran, while affirming Jesus as a prophet, doesn't provide detailed historical information about his earthly life, things like language, daily context, or interactions, in the way the New Testament does. So the issue isn't just rejecting the Bible, it's that once you do, you're left without a clear primary record of Jesus' life to answer even simple questions. That's the point being pressed. You can't dismiss the main historical source and then quietly depend on conclusions that come from that same stream of tradition. A more consistent approach would be to evaluate the sources on their merits, textual history, early testimony, and internal coherence, rather than rejecting one while still relying on what it uniquely preserves.
Says
Brother.
the Bible is reliable.
Brother, you said Jesus spoke Aramaic. You said you get it from historical sources. What historical sources tell you he spoke
Christian
Aramaic?
sources are fine. I say Christian sources.
What Christian sources?
Your Judeo-Christian scholarship, your old scholars.
Where do they get it
Early
from?
Christians.
Yeah, where do they get it from?
I would assume the disciples.
Exactly. And what did the disciples write? Where do the disciples say that he spoke Aramaic?
I don't know if
You're so close. You're so close. It's in the Bible, bro.
A verse in the Bible.
Many.
Okay.
Watch what just happened. This is subtle, but it matters. He asked for historical sources proving Jesus spoke Aramaic. When pressed, he appealed to early Christian sources, then to the disciples, and ultimately had to admit, I don't know. But here's the key. The only detailed records we actually have from the disciples' circle are preserved in the New Testament. And that text explicitly preserves Aramaic phrases from Jesus, things like Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. So without realizing it, he's leaning on the very source he's been questioning. This isn't full agreement yet, but it's a crack in the door. Because once you trust the Bible for historical details like Jesus' language, the next question is, on what basis do you reject the rest?
Well, go ahead.
So you have the New Testament is where you get that Jesus spoke Aramaic, where you get the historical evidence of the language of Jesus. So even you believe that the Bible is reliable and it offers reliable historical information on the life of Jesus.
The Bible is the only evidence for Christianity. Or the New Testament.
The Bible is the primary evidence, not the only. It's the primary evidence.
So there are other sources of evidence. There aren't. Yes,
but as far as what we know about Jesus, the New Testament, that's the primary source of information. That's the only source of information we get about his language, like for sure. With other texts, you'll get that you'll get that Jesus lived in first century Judea, which would then, by probability, you'll say, well, he might have spoke Aramaic. You wouldn't know that for sure.
They just acknowledge his existence.
They acknowledge his existence and they acknowledge his crucifixion and the claims about him that they said that he did miracles, Christians worshipped him, and yada yada yada.
Right.
So that's what we have, man. So the Bible is reliable according to you.
No, I'm just presenting evidence that I've heard. I haven't fact-checked anything.
Well, this is where we're at. You said that Jesus spoke Aramaic. That comes from the Bible.
Well, notice the shift that just happened. He started off questioning the reliability of the Bible, but when it came to something concrete, like the language Jesus spoke, he leaned on it. Step by step, he moved from, I don't know, to that comes from the New Testament, to admitting it's the primary source for Jesus' life. That's significant because once you accept the New Testament as your best historical access to Jesus, even for something as specific as Aramaic, you've already granted it a level of reliability. Now he's trying to pull back, saying he hasn't fact-checked it, but the point stands. He's using the Bible when it's useful. And the real question now is, what consistent standard allows you to accept parts of it while dismissing the rest?
No, from a linguistic standpoint.
Can you be a Muslim and believe that you're the Son of God and the Judge on Judgment Day and all that kind of stuff?
That's a theological error. It has nothing to do with the linguistic.
That has nothing to do with being a Muslim? Being a Muslim has nothing to do with theology? You can be an atheist and be a Muslim?
To submit, Jesus, the devil submits to God.
Did he?
He's not a Muslim.
You said the devil submitted to God? When?
Yeah.
When?
He doesn't submit to God in your Bible.
He's rebellious. He's the enemy.
Well, the devil doesn't do anything without God's permission in Islam. I'm not going to say anything about your religion, but
no,
in our religion.
I feel you. I feel you on that. So is the devil a Muslim since he submits to God? Linguistically?
No, the English language is weird. He's not a disbeliever. He believes in God, but
does he submit to him?
Yes.
So is he a Muslim linguistically? Say it.
You're a headache, you know.
I'm not. Look, being a Muslim is the headache, Somali, because you have to do this. You're a thinker. We've talked, so I like you. You're a thinker. You don't sit in like stupidity. You realize things. The headache is when the logic, surpasses Islam. It forces you to think beyond it. That's where the headache comes from. Go ahead.
Listen to where this line of reasoning goes. It's more serious than it sounds. If you define Muslim purely in a linguistic sense as one who submits to God and then claim that Satan submits to God because he can't act without divine permission, you've created a category problem. Because now, by that same definition, Satan would fall under submission. But that completely clashes with Islamic theology, where Satan is the ultimate rebel, the model of disobedience, not submission. So what's happening here? The definition is being stretched in one moment and restricted in another. True submission in Islam isn't just outward compliance or operating under God's permission. It includes willing obedience, sincerity, and alignment with God's will. And Satan clearly doesn't meet that standard. That's the danger of reducing theological terms to bare linguistics. It can force conclusions that the theology itself cannot accept. And once that tension shows up, you have to refine the definition or face the contradiction.
Devil, Satan, doesn't submit to God in Christianity.
No, I'll go with you. Yeah, because he can't do anything outside of what is allowed. But at the same time, he is also he's the enemy
rebellious
of God, right? He's rebellious. So in a way, there's a submission because he's powerless. So but I wouldn't say that makes him a believer or a Muslim.
When I say Muslim, it can either mean someone who follows the Prophet Muhammad or in his religion, or it can mean someone who submits to the Most High, the one monotheistic God.
Okay.
Whether he believes,
So you believe that Satan submits to the Most High God, monotheistic God. So linguistically, is he a Muslim?
It doesn't have any value, but yes.
Satan is a Muslim. We're in 2024.
No,
2024 mode.
the term, it has no value.
Oh, so Muslim means nothing.
No, him being linguistically someone who submits to God is of no value because he's rebellious and he's...
Watch the tension here. It's becoming unavoidable. On one hand, Muslim is being defined linguistically as one who submits to God. But when that definition is applied consistently, even to Satan, it suddenly has no value because of his rebellion. That's the dilemma. If submission alone isn't enough to make someone a Muslim, then the definition itself needs more than just linguistics. It requires belief, obedience, and alignment with God's will. But once you admit that, the argument shifts, because now you can't simply label figures like Jesus as Muslim based on submission alone. You'd have to prove full theological alignment with Islam, not just a general idea of submitting to God. So the moment you refine the definition to avoid including Satan, you also lose the ability to broadly claim that all who submit are Muslims. And that's the tension. Either the definition is too wide to be meaningful or too narrow to support the claim.
So what you're saying is that the word Muslim means nothing then. It means nothing. It has no value. It has no value. You can submit to the Most High God, be considered a Muslim, and it means nothing. It has absolutely no value.
Yes or no. Does Satan submit to God? Yes or no? In Christianity?
To an extent, yeah.
And the word, you can look it up yourself if you want, but the word Muslim exists in the language Hebrew. I don't know about her. Aramaic,
I've never seen it, but
I can look it up and then send it, then comment it.
Okay,
in your live.
But that still wouldn't mean anything to me.
No.
So, are we sticking with Satan being a Muslim, but it just means nothing?
No, we're not. I'm not going down that path.
Okay. So Satan is not a Muslim, even though he submits, right?
My guy, this is not a fun conversation.
Why do you think I like this topic? It's fun for me.
Fine.
Listen to what just happened. The pressure of the definition is catching up. At first, Muslim is stretched to mean anyone who submits to God. But the moment that logic leads to an uncomfortable conclusion, like including Satan, it's suddenly rejected. Now the conversation shifts to where we're not going down that path, right? That's revealing, because it shows the definition isn't being applied consistently. It's being adjusted to avoid conclusions that don't fit the theology. If submission alone isn't enough, then the original claim loses its force. So what you're seeing isn't just disagreement, it's a definition under strain. And when a definition keeps changing depending on the outcome, it stops being a clear standard and starts becoming a moving target.
Actually, no, I was going to say something from the Quran, but you don't care about the Quran.
I like you thinking before you speak, bro. Seriously. People don't do that often.
Mm-hmm. I'm not going to take too much of your time. You can
take all the no. You can stay as long as you want, Habibi. You can stay as long as you want, man. As long as you keep thinking and keep progressing, because the way that you're going is going to be out of Islam. If you continue to be honest and a critical thinker, it's going to be out of Islam.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
We'll see. Can we agree that historically Jesus is not a Muslim? Objectively, can we just agree with that?
What do you mean by Muslim? Then define Muslim.
One who submits to and believes in the concept of God, of Allah, of Islam.
When Jesus said, "My God and your God," what does he mean?
Why'd you cut his phrase in half?
He says, "What do you mean? I didn't cut his phrase in half."
Yep, he says, "My Father and your Father, my God and your God." That's the full phrase.
Pay attention to what's happening with the verse. It's a textbook case of selective use. The phrase, "my God and your God," is highlighted because it fits the argument. But the moment you include the full statement, "my Father and your Father, my God and your God," it introduces language that doesn't sit comfortably with the Islamic framework. So what happens? That part quietly drops out of focus, and that's the issue. Because you can't build a solid argument by isolating half a sentence while ignoring the other half. That adds necessary context. This isn't just about interpretation, it's about consistency. If you're going to appeal to a text, you have to deal with all of it, not just the portions that support your position. Otherwise, it stops being objective analysis and starts looking like selective quoting to protect a conclusion.
What about the verse where he says,
No. Stay right there. You brought up that verse.
No, I'm just giving you an example.
You gave me an example. A beautiful one.
Yeah, but I'm giving you another one.
No need for another example, Habibi.
Why is that? Why not?
Because you brought a perfect one. You brought a perfect example where Jesus said, "My God and your God, my Father and your Father." Is God the Most High? Is he the Father of Jesus?
In Christianity, yes, he is.
Oh, okay. So when you're referring to these biblical verses to try to show that Jesus somehow was a Muslim, let me ask you this.
No, I didn't.
What was the point of you bringing up the verse where Jesus says, "My God and your God, my Father and your Father"? What was the point of that verse?
To prove you said, I don't have to take anything out of your Bible as evidence. I can just provide something to you, and you need to take it as empirical evidence.
Somali, what was the point of you bringing up that verse in light of our discussion? Why'd you bring it up? Somali, where you go? Come on, man. Don't pause on me when I ask a good question, man. The momentum is high. We hot right now.
This exchange really brings everything into focus. A verse is introduced, "My God and your God, my Father and your Father." But when pressed on why it was brought up, there's no clear answer. And that's telling. Because the verse, in its full context, doesn't actually support the claim that Jesus was a Muslim. In Christianity, Jesus relating to God as Father is central. It reflects a unique relationship, not just general submission. So instead of proving the point, the example ends up working against it. You can't take language rooted in a specific theological framework and force it into a completely different one without addressing the differences. Historically and contextually, Jesus operated within a Jewish understanding of God as Father, not within the later Islamic concept of Allah as it's defined in Islam. And that's the key conclusion. Submission alone isn't enough to label someone a Muslim, and Jesus' own words point to a different relationship altogether. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to subscribe to Creed's Collision, like the video, and drop your thoughts in the comments. And shout out to Godlogic for pressing the conversation and dismantling the false claim that Jesus is a Muslim.